Webster Griffin Tarpley is a historian, author, journalist, lecturer, and critic of U.S. foreign and domestic policy. Tarpley maintains the September 11th attacks were engineered by a rogue network of the military-industrial complex and intelligence agencies. His writings and speeches describe a model of false flag terror operations by a rogue network in the military-industrial sector, working with moles in the private sector and in corporate media. He also maintains the notion of anthropogenic global warming is a fraud. Webster Tarpley is the author of several books, including George Herbert Walker Bush, The Unauthorized Biography, The Obama Postmodern Coup, Making of a Manchurian Candidate. By the way, all those books are available at Infowars.com. And you may know all about this, but your friends, your family, your neighbors don't. They're ready to be awakened. And he is a regular guest on this show, has his own Saturday morning, afternoon show here on Genesis, and does commentary on international television routinely. Again, he has a doctorate in history and is also an economist. Webster, you called the Middle East destabilization program just like Max Kaiser and so many others did via dollar devaluation. I have New York Magazine here, big high-powered writer, who's done the Karl Rove profile this week. He did the Kissinger profile. He's here doing a profile on yours truly. And you can put it so eloquently and succinctly before we get into all the other news. Boil down for him who is behind the destabilization in the Middle East, why they want it, what is the geopolitical trigger zone, the order out of chaos system. Give him the evidence of that, because he was asking me, and I said, wait till Tarpley comes on. I can break it down, but Tarpley can do it, say, in a 5-minute succinct package. Then we'll get into what's happening with commodities. Bernanke saying this won't affect us right now with the oil prices exploding. Bernie Madoff saying the whole government is a Ponzi scheme that Goldman Sachs is. Yeah, no kidding. We'll get your view on that. But I mean, you know, you're here talking to New York Daily News, not New York Daily News, New York Magazine, and in a nutshell, break it down for him, the overall stratagem.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the chance to do this. We're dealing with a large-scale imperialist rampage by the United States and the British. This is imperialism. This is a kind of neo-imperialism, which involves overthrowing all the puppet governments that exist, largely because these puppet governments are not dependent enough. They're too autonomous. They don't follow orders in the way that the U.S. and the British want. So it started back in November, December, in particular, with the CIA limited hangout self-exposure operation known as WikiLeaks. And we still have that going on with all kinds of sympathy gags designed to portray Julian Assange as a martyr. But essentially, this was an operation ordered up by people like Cass Sunstein, is sitting inside the Obama White House.
Cognitive infiltration.
Cognitive infiltration and even worse. So that then knocked over the relatively mild dictatorship or authoritarian regime, really, in Tunisia. And now we've got this process rolling through a series of Arab, Middle East, North African countries. The common denominator of this is that it aims at either creating new puppet governments that will be much weaker and much more dependent on the U.S. and the British, or chaos, civil war, and the division of countries via secessionism. I think right now, based on what you're seeing on the news media, Al Jazeera in particular, Al Jazeera Putsch Vision, which is the main channel of the destabilization and the coups, you can see that we're now getting close to the declaration of a no-fly zone over Libya, similar to what these same imperialists, the U.S. and the British, did in Iraq at the end of the first Gulf War back in the early 90s, where they say we're not going to allow Gaddafi to take off with any planes. I had tweeted about this in my Twitter feed. You can go back and look on February 24th from Hamburg, Germany, where I was at the time. I put out a thing saying, watch out for a no-fly zone followed by a NATO invasion, goal, among other things, to seize the oil fields and possibly divide Libya into two parts. The basis of this no-fly zone is the story that Gaddafi is using his military aviation, his air force, against these cities in Cyrenaica, in this area of Benghazi, Tobruk, near the Egyptian border. He's been accused of using these planes to strafe demonstrations and so forth. Just now, on Russia Today, we have the Russian General Staff saying that their satellite imagery of Libya shows no such thing. In other words, it's another imperialist warmonger big lie. It's in the same
But why
category.
are they triggering this now? What is the larger ramification, not just for that geopolitical sector of the Near East, Middle East, and Central Asia? I mean, is that all part of the Russian encirclement operation? But expanding, what is the plan in the markets? I saw this coming. They're now scapegoating the recession, which they're now admitting never left us, on what's happening there. They're trying to use Stuxnet to bring in cybersecurity, internet kill switch. I mean, give us the big picture. What's the larger reason for this?
Well, in terms of the Middle East itself, let's take Hosni Mubarak. Now, he had been there for 30 years. He was entrenched. Here was somebody who could say no to the U.S. and the British. And what did he say no on? He said no U.S. military bases in Egypt, no troops for the Iraq war, no troops for the Afghanistan war. And then in 2009, the new Obama administration came with their new imperialist plan, which is that you'd assemble a front of Sunni Arab states, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Jordan, along with Israel in a direct alliance with U.S. military bases in all of these countries, including Egypt, where Mubarak never wanted them. And that would then be under the U.S. nuclear umbrella, and that would then be a group of kamikaze puppets, the Arabs in particular, that would be played against Iran, against Syria, against Hezbollah, against Hamas, in other words, the radicals, the rejection front in the Middle East. Mubarak said no. Mubarak had to go. In 2010, with the U.S. screaming hysterically that all conceivable commercial ties to Iran had to be broken, Mubarak opened up these direct flights from Cairo to Tehran and back. So this was somebody who had become much too uppity, much too rebellious. Another good case, Bahrain. We've got the destabilization of the Emirate of Bahrain out there in the Gulf. What was their original sin? Well, it's that's the base of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, the one in the Persian Gulf or Arabian Gulf, and the royal family there had put up a veto saying, we forbid the United States to use this base for the purpose of attacking Iran, and therefore they had to be destabilized. Gaddafi, of course, is somebody that they have attempted to remove repeatedly. Back in 1986, using this cover story of the silly La Belle discotheque accusation against Libya with no proof, Reagan bombed Libya, tried to kill Gaddafi, and ended up killing Gaddafi's 1.5-year-old daughter. So they killed the baby, but they couldn't get Gaddafi. Then, of course, we have the Shayler affair. David Shayler of MI5, British counterintelligence, says he was sitting in his office one day when he became aware that MI6, the CIA equivalent for the British, was attempting to assassinate Gaddafi with the help of, Al-Qaeda, that they had hired an Al-Qaeda allied organization, given them 100,000 pounds of British taxpayer money, and told them to try to kill Gaddafi. They did attempt to kill him. A bomb went off. It didn't kill Gaddafi. It killed a number of innocent civilian bystanders. Now,
but obviously we're not saying Gaddafi's a good guy. They know the political climate is there to allow overthrows. The dominoes already set out by IMF, World Bank, dollar devaluation policy, driving up basic living expenses like food and energy.
Sure.
But again, what is the larger strategy?
For humanitarian reasons. They're not saying, oh, we're tired of this horrible human rights abuse.
So how are they planning on the dominoes falling around the rest of the world?
Well, let me just finish this thing on Libya. The Shayler scenario in 1995 is what we're seeing now. It's that you eliminate Gaddafi, assassinate him, then you have chaos. You can say Al-Qaeda did it. You can say Al-Qaeda is there, and then you can invade. And I think the assets that the U.S. and the British would like to seize are in this Cyrenaica area, this Tobruk Benghazi along the near the Egyptian border. That seems to be where the oil and the refineries are. Gaddafi's base is in another province of the Ottoman Empire on the other side of Libya, the Tripoli area. That's where Gaddafi seems to be holding out, and he may hold out there for a very long time. So more broadly, as seen from Europe in particular, the first thing you see about this is Tunisia is descending into chaos. The wonderful singing tomorrows of democracy and the color revolution, the jasmine revolution, has turned now into chaos, and you've got boat people. And the boat people go to the other side of the Mediterranean. But even before they get there, You have
Spain.
the Italian island of Lampedusa, you have these other Italian islands, and then you have Sicily. So all of the Mediterranean states, Spain, France, Italy, Greece, places like this.
And now they're reportedly moving special forces into the eastern area to back the rebels. AFP, let's put that back on screen. I believe that was AFP, is reporting that the rebels have had a victory near Tripoli. Now, who knows if any of the...
Yeah, you don't know any of that.
Yeah, that's Associated Press. We have no idea. I mean, they already told us 2 weeks ago that Gaddafi or a week and a half ago had run to Venezuela. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're telling all these stories. I would take all of this with lots of grains of salt because, again, we got the Kuwait incubator babies syndrome going. We've got these...
We've got the syndrome claiming on 888 that the Russians attacked Georgia.
Precisely. So here we have these accusations that Gaddafi strafing his own people. Another thing that is going on is that black Africans are being lynched by the anti-Qaddafi forces, and this includes people from southern Libya are also black. They're being lynched because they're being accused of being mercenaries for Gaddafi. I don't know if there's any proof of that either. So there are a lot of stories about what Gaddafi is supposedly doing, and I think all of this is unreliable. A couple of other things coming out of this. You got the destabilization of Europe with maybe 1 to 2 million refugees right now, as far as I can see. Plus, of course, you're driving up the price of oil, and as the price of oil goes up, this helps to solidify the dollar. It helps to stabilize the dollar because the higher the price of oil is, the more demand for dollars you have in the world. Therefore, the fewer dollars sloshing around, and it means you can relieve the pressure on the dollar.
So that's dollars the Fed doesn't have to monetize. What do you think about Lindsey Williams? I know he is in contact with a former Big Three oil CEO, and he's telling him that by the end of next year, they are planning to kill the dollar as the world reserve currency and move to this SDR, Bancor-backed basket. So, I mean, I know Lindsey's being told these things, but I mean, how does this work for the dollar long term?
I don't think this is realistic in the sense that you can, of course, remove the dollar as a reserve currency, but all of these other things they're talking about to replace it are absolutely impossible, unworkable for all kinds of reasons. Let's just go back to the Imperialist Rampage, though. You look at Pakistan, and you look at the case of this Ray Davis. Now, this person, now being held by the Pakistani government, apparently he's a CIA agent attached to the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan. This guy has all the earmarks, from afar anyway, of a terrorist controller. This is what the Pakistani press is saying. And not just any terrorist controller, but somebody who may have been setting up a radioactive nuclear materials dirty bomb inside Pakistan that would have furnished a pretext for the U.S. to come on the scene arguing, aha, the Pakistani nuclear forces are not secure. There's been a leak here of radioactive material. Therefore, we, the U.S., have to seize the bombs, the entire Pakistani nuclear force. So you can see you're in a phase of tremendous aggression, a flight forward by the imperialists. It's got to do, of course, with the world economic depression. Can be relied on, as it did in the 1930s, to drive the imperialists bonkers. They're going crazy.
Sure. What's your intel on full-on NATO, UN, U.S.-backed invasion of Libya?
Yeah, that seems to be quite possible now. You look at the assets, right? You have the British base in Larnaca, Cyprus. You've got now this U.S. aircraft carrier Enterprise plus the helicopter landing ship Kearsarge moving, in some cases, through the Suez Canal and approaching Libya. You've got the British base in Gibraltar. One that's interesting is the NATO base at Sigonella, Sicily, as well as the NATO base in Aviano in northeast Italy. Would Berlusconi, a friend of Gaddafi, allow NATO to use those bases? We've had cases in the past where Italian Prime Minister Craxi, back in the 1980s, would not allow the U.S. to do what they wanted with Sigonella. There's a famous case about a clash about who was going to arrest some terrorists from the Achille Lauro case. What you've also got is an attack on an axis. It's Putin of Russia, Berlusconi of Italy, and Gaddafi. That is in some ways a combination. All kinds of development deals, all kinds of business arrangements, the South Stream pipeline, which NATO hates, and between Berlusconi and and Gaddafi, you have quite a close relation in terms of business. Gaddafi, in the past, has been an investor in Fiat, the company that now owns Chrysler. So what the U.S. is doing is targeting these combinations or centers of resistance to, it's like a new phase of imperialism. It basically
Well, that's the French mercantilism model of keep your quasi-possessions destabilized and in proxy and fighting with each other so that you can come in and buy them up for pennies on the dollar and easily control them and pose as the savior.
Why don't we, let's let the French off the hook this time, because they don't...
I'm not even talking about the French in today's standards. I'm saying the model of globalism, is it not neo-mercantilism?
No, I wouldn't call it that. It's British imperialism. It's free trade, globalized British imperialism, not mercantilism.
Well, wait a minute. Tarpley, you're a doctor of history, so you know mercantilism wasn't invented by the French. They just gave it that name of not letting your possessions or colonies develop finished goods and you know, to control them. And then this is an expanded extrapolation of that, wanting to basically keep everybody, every nation state dependent on globalist fiat currency.
Yeah, fine. But the great historical example of this is the British Empire, which runs on
the great game,
and imperial preference. French mercantilism, in the person of Jean-Baptiste Colbert, one of the inspirers of Alexander Hamilton, the French mercantilist system for France under people like Louis XIV, Louis XV. This had definite positive features. It made France, on the whole, a more advanced industrial country than.
But that's because they had an industrial policy. Still, the overall policy was to concentrate power and vertically integrate.
Right, but I would call this is simply imperialism. This is British imperialism, and you're hearing in the U.S. media more and more British voices as the U.S. policy begins to resemble more and more the British Empire at its worst. You're hearing more and more British voices on television and radio explaining to you why this must be the
Webster,
case.
stay there. I want to come back in the final segment and talk about Madoff saying the whole government's a Ponzi scheme, what you see happening with the deterioration of the global economy, what you see as hot spots, just a bunch of little points I want to hit on for the next countries to face this type of insurrection. Will the globalists go after Saudi Arabia? That's an important question. Segment with Webster Griffin Tarpley coming up in retransmission. Max Kaiser, Lindsey Williams, and then, of course, again, Tarpley. But we'll be back tomorrow live, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Has some more informative and enlightening guests coming up. All I can say about the liberty movement worldwide and the awakening to the globalist crime syndicate is winning. We are certainly making headway thanks to all of you out there taking action. We've got a fighting chance against this Anglo-American British Empire, too. That's not blaming the British people or the American people or the Chinese people. When we talk about corruption in nations, or the Israeli people, when we talk about corruption in Israel or anywhere else. It's the system, this global corporate fascist system that we're dealing with. Webster, you heard all those questions I threw out. What do you think about what's happening in Saudi Arabia? What are the other spots they want to overthrow? Do the globalists want to overthrow all these puppet states?
One of the things you can see is an attack on the nation state itself, and I think this is very important. The essence of empire is that you've got a worldwide empire. You can call it the New World Order if you want to. It's simply the old world order, but in a more aggressive, extreme form. It's the International Monetary Fund with NATO as the enforcers, with the U.S. and the British running NATO, at least getting the assets that they need. And this rules over the world, and the nation states are destroyed. They're carved into pieces. Sudan has been carved into two parts. Libya may be falling apart into at least two parts right now. Egypt might be subjected to something similar, detaching the Suez Canal.
So the true balkanization breakup.
Precisely. It's the Bernard Lewis plan, 3 Iraqs, 5, 6 Irans, and so on down the line. So everybody gets carved as a result of
Which you've been saying for decades was their plan there.
I think so. And now, look at Algeria. If they can bring this into Algeria, they certainly will. The things they're interested in North Africa would be what? Algerian oil, Libyan oil, the Suez Canal. Those are the assets. Those are valuable from the imperialist.
And they've just started breaking Sudan in two. I mean, they're really moving.
And getting the oil there. So again, we're in an unprecedented imperialist rampage.
Is this not basically a soft World War III?
In effect, except the one thing you would say is if you compare this to 1848, in 1848 the British were destabilizing countries that were controlled by the Tsar of Russia or the Austrian Emperor or the King of Prussia or whatever it was. It's sort of enemy states. But now they're doing it to their own so-called friendly allies or puppet states or whatever you want to call it. And this is the
knowing that if Egypt falls as one domino, then states they don't control will be easier to fall.
Precisely. Now, again, with the Saudi Arabians, I was in Germany last week. There's the European press still a little bit better on these things. There was an article in one of the German papers that Saudi Arabia is now doomed, that they are going to be overthrown for sure. Now, the way that the royal family in Saudi Arabia fights back, it's very interesting, is with generous concessions, right? King Abdullah has now made about $36 billion worth of concessions. If you're living in Saudi Arabia, you just got yourself a nice pay increase. You got your health care for less and so forth. One of the things it shows, go into the streets, you might get somewhere. One of the things that occurred to me is if the imperialists want to destabilize the world, let's turn the imperialist destabilization of the world into a destabilization of imperialism.
Well, that was my next question. They're not invincible. They may not. I mean, is this going well for them right now?
Right now, they have the initiative for sure, and you can see that there's a pushback from Russia in particular. The Russians saying that this story about strafing is a complete phony. We have Rogozin, the Russian observer at NATO.
I'll tell you what, Webster, we're going to do 5 minutes overdrive so you can finish. Plus,
okay.
I have new news that I knew was coming, but it just blew me away. We need to get it up on Infowars.com. It's only on PrisonPlanet.com right now. Steve Watson, bombshell with mainstream confirmed reports. They're going to put full chest x-rays, trying your entire body in the airports. This is psychological warfare. It causes 15,000 deaths per year. Coming up. We are live into the fourth hour here with Webster Griffin Tarpley. It's 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you for joining us, Webster. I've got a huge story here I want to get into with the TSA. Security theater creep, full-strength X-ray body scanners touted for airports. What about the workers standing around this with no lead shielding? I mean, what's the point to all this?
Well, it's probably a trial balloon, but remember, if the imperialists are on this worldwide rampage in foreign policy and destabilizations and putches and color revolutions and coups, then, of course, that has its reflection in domestic policy. And this is what you're seeing there. So
it's prisoner training, and they can put us in a microwave now. Why not put you in a full fryer?
Yeah, I would say, though, people should focus on the idea of saying no to a U.S. invasion of Libya, no to a no-fly zone. The most effective way to do this is for an anti-war candidate to challenge Obama in the Democratic primaries. We're less than a year away from Iowa and New Hampshire, and so if there's anybody interested in peace, avoiding war inside the Democratic Party, they better come forward now, because otherwise the Democratic Party is pretty much a dead duck. Concerning the issues that we were talking about, if I may mention, for those of you who are night owls out there, I think I'm going to be on Coast to Coast AM tonight, so if you want to tune in several hours, when Alex is not on the air, and there's nothing to do anyway. You might.
Well, I could care less, man. I mean, I'm happy for folks to hear you tonight. What hour are you on? Are you on the whole show?
I think it's 3 hours, but I'm not certain.
Well done, Tarpley. Be sure and give me an Infowars plug on there.
Yes, certainly.
But I'm joking, Tarpley. But listen, continuing here, I'm on Coast to Coast all the time. George Norrie's great. And I'm glad he's covering hardcore issues on the show. We appreciate him really changing course away from what Art Bell used to do. That's why the show's so successful. But, I mean, in closing, Webster, to sit here and to watch the way CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all in unity, saying something must be done, we must invade now, and then now it's going to set the precedent to invade every country that has a dictator or a bunch of plutocrats suppressing people. I mean, I hope folks realize that this looks like the beginning of the launch of World War III with the cadre hors d'oeuvre to intro it by going in to help people in a humanitarian way. I mean, this is the full takeover of the Middle East, North Africa.
this is the essence of Obama, is that you don't attack countries based on the stories that Bush, Cheney, and the neocons were telling. But now you have different stories that involve human rights and...
You said that when he was running. You laid it all out, Webster. It's incredible. I mean, I just have to say you're incredible, Tarpley.
Well, thank you very much. But the question now is, what can we do about it? And I think the idea is people have to fight for their rights. I think it means fight for your economic rights. I have to tell you, I'm pro-Wisconsin. I think if they're going to take your union rights away, they can then come with an X-ray machine. This is sort of the same idea. So, but the main thing right now is no additional war. We got 3 wars now. We've got Iraq still going. We've got Afghanistan. We've got Pakistan. And now we're going to add Libya and North Africa to this. These imperialists are just crazy. And these charming ladies, Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice, hissing in the United Nations. These people are crazy. This is twilight of the gods for the imperialists. The danger is with their flight forward, they could indeed get us into World War III.
All right, Webster, we're out of time. I want to say bye to you.